I am American, as you can all hear, though I really wish I could speak like the Brits because it all sounds so much better. But what you can't hear is that I'm also half French. About 40 years ago, my mother, a woman named Marie-Pierre Pupin, left northern France and went to that city with the Green River, just outside of there, and she met a man named Joe Baltz. And together they made 2 babies, one of them being here. And that meant that we grew up, we spent our schooling in America. And in summers, we would go to northern France, outside of Lille, where our grandparents were obsessed with educating their heathen American grandchildren to please God make sure they're cultured, which meant that we ate all summer long. So this dichotomy, this going back and forth throughout my entire childhood, actually made me question a lot of who I was. What was my personal identity? What did I belong to? What was culture? What did belonging even mean? And as I started to observe differences in behaviors and rituals, the biggest difference that I found was this, in how people either sat down around tables to eat or stood and put things in their mouth. How food was either prepared in a kitchen or taken out of a package. And these consumption behaviors seemed to lay the foundation for how people consumed all other parts of their lives, from buying cars to engaging with economies, relationships. Very simply put, how people ate was how they behaved. Right? It's a pretty simple equation. And it was something that I was very familiar with. I mean, I grew up with my mother cooking like a French person in the middle of a lot of packaged gloriousness. And that led me to wonder, well, why are people eating then? Well, we eat for lots of reasons. We eat for hunger, we eat for fuel, but we also eat for taste, which is the topic of this evening, right? And what is taste all about? Well, we eat things because they taste good. We don't eat things because they taste bad, right? It's just that simple. And there are so many different definitions of taste. And I would actually invite what is good taste? What tastes good? What tastes good to you?
An example?
Yeah, what do you like to eat?
Good figs taste good.
Oh, well done. Good figs. They gotta be good. I hope they are, yeah. What's good for you?
Mango.
Mangoes are good taste. What about someone in the back with the beret hat? You. Yeah. What tastes good? Yes, you're turning around perplexed. It's you. Chocolate, of course. Obviously. Taste is completely different subjective for each of us. I mean, when I was little growing up in the Green River, I would go to school every day, to my elementary school, and I would go with this little brown bag lunch that was very lovingly packed by my mother with a leftover of like poulet à la crème with actually this fork. And what would I do? I would sit down at the lunch table and I would promptly find Mike Carlin and trade my delicacies for a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on bleached white bread and those things called Doritos because they were so good. Whoa. And that's exactly it. What is good has a spectrum of meaning. And this is the technical definition, right? Taste is a sensation of flavor perceived in the mouth and throat on contact with a substance. That's rather clinical. You put this thing in your mouth, it touches your tongue, you chew, and it swallows. Repeat, right? No, that's not what it is. Because what happens in between all of this is this. Taste is perceived. Taste is perception. And perception occurs when our senses are stimulated and we start to understand something through our senses. And we've seen examples of this. I think Sam's presentation was a perfect example of it, right? Full sensory experiences. That's what happens when we put something in our mouth. And that's what makes ingredients so very powerful. Because as was said in my introduction, I worked on a book last year called The Love Food Book, which explores the relationship between ingredients and desire and emotions. And I asked 15 different chefs and mixologists from around the world to create their definitions of love. And what came out of it was this beautiful host of really lovely narratives, as well as surprising flavors and textures. But what I learned is actually that this route from hand to mouth is ripe with so much information that actually affects our taste before we ever put anything in the mouth, right? This is experience. Something is happening. Our ingredients are surrounded by so many things, like culture, architecture, history, personal narrative, right? It's not just calories. All of these things play into how we perceive taste. And I think all of these things can actually contribute to really wonderful, stunning examples, like we've seen before, and can actually make a maraschino cherry taste like this. This is my face smashed against a plate. I really like to feel things. I actually sort of have developed a practice in body contact cooking, I think, by now. But what I want to do with you tonight is actually try to deconstruct what that means, just as an everyday practice, because often we go through life, and yes, we all have super busy lives, myself implicated in that, right? And often we just put things in our mouth, and and it tastes a certain way, right? And you go back to it because it tastes good. But really what tasting is more of this, is actually paying attention to everything that's going on around you, to start to understand more than just flavor, but really what a full experience is. And so this morning I made this. Now, you all have a fig on your plate, right? You should please gaze at the fig. and then you can look up here. Now, I have a microscope actually with me in my bag, which I can't plug in, but I did this morning. It magnifies up to 220 times. So what you're seeing there is the outside of the fig, and then sort of a piercing on the inside of the fig, right? And it's incredible. Did you know the fig has 1,600 seeds inside of it? It's an amazing little creature. And it actually is one of the first ingredients that was actually cultivated by man. Anthropologists found evidence of it from like 9,000 BC. You find evidence of it in the Bible. Adam and Eve wore fig leaves, right, to cover themselves. Buddha was actually said to arrive at some sort of epiphany while seated under a fig tree. And I like all these random facts. I've studied this a lot. And the Greeks actually believe that it's such a sacred fruit that around every harvest time in ancient Greece, they would have this festival, and there would be ritual acts of copulation. So think about that. We're going to eat this. Be careful. The Romans believed that it was a gift from Bacchus, the god of intoxication. The history goes on and on and on and on. And that is something to think about with all of our ingredients. They have come before us. We are just passing through this world. They've been here for a long time. This little fig has way more history than you or I or us all together. Right? It's something that's been revered for ages. And that is something to take into consideration as we all pick up our first fig. Can you take it in your hand with me? No forks or knives. Now, I'll ask you to take just one bite, but before you do that, to focus very clearly on it and actually think about what are your teeth doing as they get through that flesh, right? It's a little bit hard, it's a little tough, and then it will pierce and it'll go inside. And it will start interacting with all of those little bits that'll be tangled and wonderful inside of you. So just take one bite and really try to think about, what does this feel like? There's actually a reason that it's considered an aphrodisiac food, right? It kind of is fleshy. And when you look at it, it's quite a suggestive little shape, ladies. Right? So this is our first encounter with anything. It's sight, right? This is what this film piece looked at. This is what we see when we hold food. And then we start to touch it, right? And you have a physical engagement with it. Now, what else you have at your table is a pack of earplugs. Yeah. Okay, please unwrap your earplugs. Yeah, I wore these on the airplane, not these, but great. And as you put them in, what I'll ask you to do, you can still hear me with the earplugs in, right? No. What? Oh. Is to nestle them in there, right? And we're going to take our second bite of fig. But while doing this, listen, because what I told you earlier is that the fig has almost 1,600, right? So I guess you have 800 seeds in this. Sorry, not 16. But each one of those, when your teeth goes through it, will start to do this little snap, crackle, and pop. It's called mouthfeel. It's something that most industrial food producers think about, right? And if you listen to them crunch and crackle, it's like a little mini orchestra, and you can hear yourself chewing. And you can hear this amazing little product that actually is almost designed to make music for you in its own way. So no speaking, earplugs in, take another bite. You all look totally perplexed. I wish I could photograph you. And so what you start to see is that two senses are at play now, right? And those things are affecting our taste. Whenever we trigger any sense, it's information that our body is receiving. And that is recorded in us. And the next part of that is you also have a little bit of a vanilla pod on your plate, or you should, yep. Now, yes, take it in your hands, and if you rub your fingers on it, right, it'll actually start to release some of its oils. That's actually how vanilla beans are made, right? They're massaged for a very long time. And in that rubbing of it, what will happen is that you release some scent. So just put it up to your nose and smell that. Smell the beans, smell the scent. And what does it remind you of? Does anyone have anything that vanilla reminds them of? Ice cream. Yeah. What else? What? Custard. Anyone? Pardon? Bourbon. Woo! That's the grand finale. Yeah, each of these things are often tied to foods, right? And those foods will be tied to experiences. I have many vanilla experiences with bourbon that include late nights and tiny small rooms usually. Or ice creams and cakes and parties, right? Scent is one of our most powerful senses because it goes directly through our limbic system first. So, and the limbic system is the part of your brain that experiences memory. So it first translates in there. That's why with any sort of a scent, you actually can almost go back to a certain place in time. And it actually can feel like you're there, right? So to finish the experience, if you put those earbuds back in, if you smell this vanilla, and if you take your last little bite of fig, all together, try to really focus on how these things are moving together, on where your vanilla is going, up your nose, through your cheekbones, down into your throat. Your vanilla is kind of coating the inside of yourself as your fig is coming into your mouth and crackling and popping, and they're dancing a little bit together. And as I said, this is really what starts to create full taste. On top of it all, a little bit of story. I mean, imagine the Greeks sitting around doing this, huh? So when we move forward, I think, in our lives, it's something that I try to think about. It's something I try to think about in my practice. It's something that I try to think about in the projects that I make, is that taste really is about sensory experience. And that sensory experience is a combination of our senses, of sight, of smell, of sound, right? It also has to do with narrative, with the way that we come to an ingredient, with the stories that we're told. So if you ever do want to take someone and impress them, I've come up with sort of a simple, very simple rule. Just remember to smell good, look good, sound good, and feel good. There are a host of lotions for this. And that, my friends, is what I think good taste is. Thank you so much.